item, a really, really broad item, right? And it's an item that I'm unfamiliar with, even though I know what it is. I don't have direct experience, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? As you can imagine, this is a very broad topic, a very important topic, a topic a lot of us do not have any direct experience with, right? Even if you kind of fall in the category of, whether it's a minority or things of that nature, you don't know anything more about it, right? So I've lived most of my life in the US, for instance, right? So maybe given the fact that I come from India, I'm assuming maybe that if you drew a category, I might be part of that. I mean, I don't know. Let me ask this question before saying anything stupid. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Uh, how would you define that for somebody who kind of understands it but not doesn't exactly know what it is?
Right. So diversity is having people who come from different backgrounds, like varied people. It can be people of different age, people of different ethnicities, people with different genders, people with different sexual identities. So it's all of these characteristics. And you've got what is called protected characteristics in the UK. That's how it's called. And you can't discriminate people because of their ethnicity, because of their gender and all of that. But diversity, I think, extends much more and beyond that, because you have diversity of how do you call it, like neurodiversity, for example, and maybe different conditions, and you have diversity in like a mix of introverts and extroverts, and you have diversity in people's body shape. So it goes beyond. It's just making sure that you have people who are different. So that's diversity.
Okay.
Equity, and the reason I use equity and not equality is because equity is giving the same opportunity for everyone. There's an image which I wish I could share, but I think it's going to take me a long time to find. Actually, let me see if I can find it. Equity versus equality. I'll just do a quick, here we go, a quick Google search to find this and share this with you.
Let me share my screen.
Yep, yeah, you need to allow me to share my screen.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Let me
No problem.
share screen. Can you check if it works now, Magali?
Yeah, perfect. So, I don't know. Okay. Okay. Let me actually, well, I think it's going to be easier if I send you the link and you share your screen, because I don't have the right settings right now.
No,
so
no
here
worries.
we go. You. Good. Here we go. So yeah, if you can open this link and share, I think that's the best example. That's the first item I found on Google search. And you can really see clearly the difference between, so if you scroll down a bit for everybody to see, yeah, cool. So between equality and equity. So in equality, you give the same thing to everyone. So you see here, you've got a tall person, an adult, then a child, and then maybe a toddler or somebody small, or somebody smaller. So equality, you give the same thing to everyone, but that's not enough, because the third person still cannot see. Equity, which is why I'm using this, is you give every person, every individual, what they need to be at the same level. So that's why I'm using equity instead of equality.
Let's come back to this. This is like brilliant. This goes back to why I rue every day that I don't have the skills to draw. My wife can draw, I cannot. And every time I have to draw these diagrams, I have tools. I use code to diagram tools, which are great for engineering. But still, sometimes I have something in my mind that I want to represent. The code to diagram tools don't do justice, right? They're not meant for that. I always wish I had the skill, even not to the extent, not necessarily the creative and every other skill, but just to be able to draw something, because this diagram is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I have a feeling I've seen something like this before. So the difference here, just to restate the exact same thing that you said, which I couldn't say it any better, but I'm just going to state it just for my own understanding, is the fact that you're saying equality. Sounds about right. Yep. We give the same tools, everything, the same set of things to everybody, and we feel like, why not, right? They should be able to use that like everybody else. But there is still a problem. There are here, it's the age, possibly there could be other metrics that make the difference here, but for a variety of reasons, what we are saying here is the third person or the second person may not be able to use the same things you've given them and put that use to the same extent that the other two people could have possibly done so equity on paper makes you as the giver maybe feel right. You gave the height, that stool, and you're like, I did my job. But unfortunately, the purpose remains unsolved, right? You didn't meet that objective, for instance. Brilliant. Okay, so the next one was inclusion, right?
Yes. So inclusion is about making sure the environment you create is a good environment for everyone. Um, I'm going to give you an example. Companies more and more are conscious that they need to hire diverse candidates. So let's say they're going to hire like more people of color or more people with a disability or more, women and people who are non-binary. Uh, but so they're happy because again, they feel good about themselves. Yes, we recruited a person, let's say, who is in a wheelchair. And you're like, okay, great. But then they don't make the environment, the work environment inclusive. So that person actually cannot join, cannot enjoy, and cannot perform the same way. And they end up leaving. So
Right,
it's a bit
absolutely.
it's a bit like in a marketing funnel where you acquire lots of users, but then you can't retain them, so they leave. Um, so inclusion is about making sure you build an environment where everybody feels safe and can be themselves. So it's about, for example, if you do a company meeting, let's say a get together, and you have someone who is using a wheelchair, then make sure they can come to the venue and provide the right accommodation, maybe transportation to help them come to the venue. It's about the words we use as well. Maybe not using words like, oh, we blacklist something, or a webmaster, for example, because this can have a different meaning for maybe Black
Wow.
people, for example. So saying we actually removed this URL, and this is a website administrator. So making the environment including is about that, and that enables you to actually keep people.
Oh my God, it's brilliantly said, right? I'm not going to do any justice saying it any better, so I'm just going to just add an example just to accentuate what you just said here, right? I'll give a real life example, right? I think people are good, right? Majority of the people in this world are good people, right? Sometimes like you mentioned, unconscious bias earlier, right? We all make mistakes, not necessarily wanting to make those mistakes. It's just that we didn't know any better till we educate ourselves, and we're going to have to constantly strive to be educated, because I could be a developer who boxes myself into a machine and my IDE and my editors and my whatever, and not have to understand the rest of it. But it does make a difference. People sometimes, I feel like, tend to think that role you happen to be in and playing in a company, you have to have more exposure to these items. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think DEI is any more important to someone in the company than it is to everybody, to the other person, right? In other words, it's equally important, even if you're not actually having a conversation about this. Even though this is a little bit different from product management, but since it is in your book and it's very relevant to product management, right? I just want to dig a little bit deeper and give an example. My first job, just Magali was in the 200 years ago. I'm just kidding. It was a long time ago. My first job, it was in a small town in Ohio, right? I was in college for a long time, a whole lot longer than I, in hindsight, wished I was. I don't know. Maybe it was easier than looking for work. I don't know, but I was in college for a long time. And then when I took up my first job, I had done a lot of courses like everybody, but you're never prepared, right? College only prepares you so much. My idea behind these technical podcasts is literally that, trying to have people listen and watch and give some practical real life experience into what happens in the workplace. How do you build software? Not just reading on, and reading is great, but you need to, sort of supplement your reading with practical experience and conversations and whatnot, right? So my first job, I go to this interview. Could they have hired somebody else who was if they had waited longer or whatever, could that team and the company have found somebody a whole lot smarter than Krish? I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's no question about that, right? Did most of the people working in the company look anything like I do? No. I mean, that's a good thing, but they did not, right? So they did not. Yet somebody decided to give this opportunity, right? They said, you know what? Maybe we'll give. And there's a lot of formalities and paperwork and process and visa and there was a 999 reasons not to possibly have taken the pain to hire me into that position, right? But they found maybe one reason to hire me, whatever the reason happened to be, right? And I couldn't be any more grateful because I tell people this is for real, right? It's a small town in Ohio. It's not New York City. It's not a big town, not a big city. And then it not only the fact that I got hired into that company, the name of the company is D-Bowl, right? The first line of code I wrote, Gina, she sat with me and I had to write a line of code. And this is, I still remember, it's etched in memory for me. I had to create a synonym, an Oracle synonym. There were like 45 other synonyms in that exact same file, and it's exact same syntax. I think it was a create synonym, name of the synonym, blah, blah, blah. The only thing different was the name of the synonym and I believe the table it was sitting on, etc. Right? You didn't have to, this is somebody who's got 7, 8 years of college experience, done a lot of software courses. You could have just given them, let them do, check out the code and do that stuff. No, no, no. She sat down with me, made me write it, helped me do it. I wrote it, I committed the changes, and it was not all over. We go to the meeting the next day. She calls out for Krish saying, hey, you know what? We have a new developer in the team. Krish, you did a great job making this code change. I was speechless. I even when I say this right now, I feel a little bit emotional about it because I don't know, it just feels like an emotional thing. Sorry. She took the pain. Oh my God, this is weird. I didn't think of this example up front, and all that I'm trying to make a point here is the fact that they're great people. You just have to run into them, right? You just have to stumble into those great people. And 9 out of 10 times, if you're like me, they happen to be absolute strangers, right? It's not like they talk about support system, right? The support system is, it's lovely to have a great family, great circle of friends and whatnot from a personal standpoint, right? Which all of us want to be blessed to have. But from a professional standpoint, I think even if I took my example personally, every single person who's given me guidance, mentorship, even not in the exact same language, but along the way, has been people who have stood nothing to gain, absolutely nothing to gain. And my hope is like by doing this, even though there is always a gain, right? The podcast happens to be with an intent that you're trying to, pitch your products and solutions as a company, but that's to me an excuse more than anything else, right? There is more of an intent, but I'm very careful not to call out for other things as an intent because then if you slap your logo, then everyone's going to vilify you and say that was not your intent, right? So I try to go the other extreme saying the intent is very clear, it's for the company, but I know inherently and innately deep down the intent is beyond that, right? People watching and listening learn something from this process. So DEI, just to restate it again, different parts of the world, I have to believe stress on these items very differently, right? There's a lot of stress on this in the US. I know because I know people are in the business of, trying to make that happen, right? And I've worked really closely with folks in Europe as well, right? Now, I don't work as closely with folks in other parts of the world, but I hope and I believe that this is happening, to the exact same extent. I know there are places that it might take a little bit longer than it takes some countries, but so you talk about that item. So let me ask you this question after all of my rambles there, right? Sorry, I now that I rambled for a long time before I ask a question, does any of does it did some of it make sense, even if not all of it?
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing your story. No, I really enjoyed it. And I just noted one thing you said, we stumble upon people. And I think, yes, but sometimes we have to like consciously go towards people because otherwise we may stumble upon people who again look like us. So we have to, for example, if I think about recruitment, if you just think, oh, I'm just going to put my job ads out there and people are going to apply and I'm going to have diverse candidates. Well, it's not going to happen. You actively have to seek some people from diverse backgrounds. So maybe partner with associations who are, about like people of color, for example, and really advertise to them. Make sure your language is inclusive as well, so they want to apply. And you can't just stumble upon people. So you have to make a conscious effort. But
Well,
I agree with your point of like the
I think
support
you make a
network.
brilliant point there, right? This is not my forte. I have to be very careful in venturing into some of these topics because you can be a good person. You hope you're a good person, but you don't know these correct terminologies. And sometimes you could say the wrong thing. And the social media is like, they could take you to
Horrible.
task for saying the simplest things and even it didn't mean it the bad way, right?
I know.
What you just said is brilliant. You said it's not going to happen magically. Even
Yeah.
if you have good intent, you're going to have to execute on that intent. Like if I took an engineering example, just like I take cooking examples, some cases engineering examples and art examples. If Krish has good intent in writing great code, it's good that he has good intent in writing great code, but it's not going to happen unless Krish takes the initiative in actually writing good code. How can I take that initiative? I look at other people who are smarter than me, and there's no dearth of those people, thankfully, right? And I learn from people smarter than me. I look at examples. I look at expressions, like idiomatic expressions and languages of what, sometimes, Magali, when you're writing code in different languages, you're polyglot, but you start writing like Ruby code like Golang or Golang code like Java, and it doesn't smell. It's like cooking Indian food like French food or French food like. It's a stupid example, but I'm just saying that, right? Because I think it's not a stupid example actually, because sometimes I go have Indian food in Washington, D.C. in the city. Uh, it's like a beautiful restaurant. It looks great and awesome, right? I can even call out for the name because it's just a restaurant. It's feedback or whatever. The food is not even close to Indian food, right? And once we ordered like, I think like okra masala, I think something like that. And it comes to the table. And my wife is like, no, I think you got the order wrong because this is not what I ordered because it's a different vegetable, right? And she's no, ma'am, this is what you ordered. This is what we sell. Yeah. She was like, this is unbelievable. We almost want to walk up to the rest of the folks who are sitting there and paying these top dollar and saying, I hope you enjoy the food, but please just go to these other countries to make sure that you verify the veracity or the validity of that food, for instance, right? So you have to I have to look at good code, talk to people, understand and learn to make that good code happen. Just sitting here and saying I want to write good code is not going to make good code happen, right? That to me is very easily understandable as an engineer. And I feel like a lot of the audiences, people watching, a good majority of them are developers and architects. So that probably is going to resonate even quicker with them, right? But so you're going to have to go out and make. But let me throw in two words here. I want to be very careful because I don't know how correct or wrong these words are, but this is my understanding. You said you have to go carefully, look out, and take the initiative, take the pain. It doesn't happen easily, and please find those people, right? If I use the word diversity hire in the context of that, I want to know how correct or wrong that is. First of all, am I right in understanding that that's not a positive combination of words to use, or is it a positive combination of words to use? Diversity hire.
So I'm not an expert to go back to that topic. I'm very passionate, and if you look at the book, you'll see that the people chapter is bigger than the other ones because this is my bias is
Right.
towards those topics, right? But I wouldn't claim to be an expert. I think diversity hire can have a negative connotation because the argument from some people is, oh, we just hired that person because she's a woman.
Right,
But
exactly,
she
right?
didn't deserve it, right? So I think it has a negative connotation. I'm not quite sure which words should be used instead. We just want to hire for
Beautifully said, right?
the best candidate.
I think the words don't matter at all as long as your intent is correct, because sometimes, when you're not an expert, and I think I want to touch upon the fact that you mentioned, I think there is this fear personally too, right? Of saying something. When it comes to engineering, I don't fear that, right? Because I could offend somebody because I don't like the code or I think the architecture is different, but that's not personal, fortunately, right? When you go to subjective items, people can have an interpretation, right? Oh, if Krish says it, what is his background? Where does he come from? Where does he stand? And a plethora of other factors. And there are things that you can or cannot say just because you happen to have certain backgrounds, for instance, right? but I take a different perspective, even if I'm sharing it here for the first time, like on recorded video, for instance, right? I think you don't have to be an expert to sometimes have an opinion, because if we put ourselves in a closet and say I'm not an expert and I don't want to talk about it, I think more people talking about things, even if they don't know it, gives provides more avenues for you to get out of the, be less ignorant about it, for instance, right? Rather than not try to take that initiative. So I don't know if it's correct in me. I'm far from an expert in any topic for that matter, but I would say if your intent is good, and if you know your intent is good, then asking those questions is probably not a bad way to go, because who are you answerable to at the end of the day, right? Yourself, right? When my clients ask me on a project, mainly about certain different things, I tell them, hey, I don't know if I can appease you, and I'm not even going to try, because that's not my job. But what I'll try to do is appease myself, right? Because that's my job. Did I produce the best quality code that I could produce? Am I doing this job for you as I'm doing it for my own company, for instance, right? Because when we do managed services, if I feel like the answer to that is yes, that's all I can promise, right? That's all I can promise. And years go by, and it sometimes, again, strangers, right? Someone hit me up asking me for help not too long ago and said, when I answered this, right, said something along these lines, his response, her response, sorry, was, uh, if you can do what you do for your company at the levels of commitment that you probably do for Snowpal, that's all you ask for. I can ask for, right? And I was very happy about that comment, because they did not know how I would have done it, right? It's just them doing some research, reading my comments or videos or whatever. But I think that's what everyone can do. If Magali writes a product management book to the best of like Magali's abilities, for instance, right? That's the best you can ask of yourself, I would imagine, right? I don't want to speak for, I'm just saying that's the best we can ask. And now if somebody reading the book, it makes an impact on them. Now I'm going to make a reference to it in my, I may not call it for the page numbers, but I'm certainly going to call out for the book and the fact and some of the other things that I happen to do. And that's how you spread this knowledge, right? You're spreading this knowledge and people are, watching it and taking it. And sometimes they don't write to you saying that they learn from you. I wish they did, not because you have to feel great about yourself, because you feel like it's reaching out to a community. Because at the top of this year, mainly, I took a 4-month, 5-month break from LinkedIn because I was working on APIs. I was heads down for like 4 months, doing nothing else, right? Starting in the morning, ending at night, starting in the morning, ending at night. So I did not write on LinkedIn or share videos or all of my rambles, right? And I thought it was only my mom was like watching it, because she takes the pain to say, I like it, or this is great, as a form of support, but it's very explicit support. Sometimes I ask her to tone it down because it's too obvious. I'm like, please, can you go easy on it? Because it comes across very obvious. Like, okay, you probably may or may not, she clearly didn't watch my video on Golang architecture for like 35 minutes, but she says, this is a great video. And I'm like, Mama, please don't, just say whatever if you watched it, say it, otherwise don't say it, right? But I thought nobody else did. But there were people who reached out to me saying, Krish, hope all is well. I haven't seen any videos. I'm looking to watch. I was like, wow. So you actually have watched one of my videos in the past? They're like, yeah, I do it all the time. I was like, can you do me a favor and do what the I was behaving like a YouTuber. Can you hit this link, like, or the comment, or say something? Because I believe that's how the LinkedIn algorithms pick this up. Uh, People don't have to do it. People don't know how to do it. I forget to do it sometimes, but nowadays, after I realize that that's the case, I make an effort to doing this, just the tiny little hitting that button, right? Because we are all at the mercy of algorithms of these large corporations, like it or not, right? But I think it's important. I just want to, even though I rambled a bit there, I'm trying to say that even if you don't feel like you're an expert, it's okay to having these types of conversations with people you're comfortable having those conversations with, right? Not everybody's going to say that on voice or video, for instance. When I reached out for podcasts, a lot of them, I would love to have a conversation, but I'm camera shy, or I mean, I don't know how public speaking works. I'm like, you know what? Look at me. A lot of people have told me in different facets of life, if Krish can do it, I can do it, and I take it as a big compliment. No matter what they may have meant, I take it as a great compliment, saying, okay, that gives you that person the perspective that, okay, this cannot be hard because Krish was able to do it, right? So if I can have this conversation on video on topics that I'm completely unfamiliar with, And I think it shouldn't preclude anybody else from having those exact same combinations, right? But the question I was going to ask there was this topic, and much like a few other topics, is there am I right in saying that they're not necessarily directly only relevant to product management, even though the book is about product management? But the reason you probably talk about these topics is because it is also relevant to product management. Is that a right takeaway?
Yeah, exactly. I think these are topics, you're right, which are quite like general, but it's impacting particularly product management because every company is a tech company nowadays. Every company, either your product is a technological product, or either you use technology to support your employees, to support the services you provide. So every company is a tech company. So it, the book is about product management, but somehow also about the tech space somehow as well,
And
right?
I think you called
And
out for it in one of the paragraphs where you mentioned that I think when you say tech company, I recall very vividly reading it said there are two types of companies. One is like literally a tech company, and the other one is not so much a tech company. I'm not doing justice to paraphrasing it, but I remember you mentioning that in the book.
yeah. So the other category, yeah, I called them tech-enabled companies. So the the technology is not the core of what they do, but they have to use technology to like internally, and they have to use technology to serve their customers as well. Yes. So every company is a tech company. So yes, it it pretty much impacts everybody. Diversity and equity and inclusion. Yes, it's for everyone, including outside of the workplace. Yeah. I don't know, maybe doing some education at school, for example. That's outside of the workplace. You know, explaining to people, for example, that gender is not binary, that pronouns and all of that. That doesn't need to happen just in the workplace, and that's more a cultural aspect to it as well. So you're right. A lot of the themes, especially on people, could be applied to other domains, including engineering. And we know that there's a lack of diversity, especially gender diversity, for example, in engineering. So the paragraph could be exactly the same with maybe different stats, because I've got stats on product management diversity in the US, but we could have the same chapter of a book on a lot
And
of
you
other
couldn't be
things.
more right about the lack of that diversity, right? Because I'm going to have a podcast, a more technical, a slightly different podcast about code with somebody. She's based out of Delhi, and we had this conversation not on video, but about the lack of that in a certain kinds of diversity, right? And I know by virtue of a variety of people that I know that there the diversity is lacking, and it becomes challenging, right, to making those kinds of adjustments. For instance, this is I have there's so many more items, but I'm just worried I won't do justice to the depth of those items, because I'm not in my mind, at the back of my mind, there's two things that are running in my mind. One is how I'm going to edit this video into two parts. That's completely unrelated, right? And two, as somebody who's you have these podcasters, you have beautiful rooms and backgrounds and lovely things, and hopefully I'll get that one day, but not there yet, right? To the point that I think somebody's the mowing company is here mowing the lawns. I'm hoping you can even hear me. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. I don't hear this either. Don't worry, this is my kitchen behind me.
Oh, no, 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 yeah, because I'm
So
like,
no, I hear you perfectly well, and I can't hear the background.
oh, okay, cool. Because I can hear it like really loud. I'm like, oh my God, is it like, are they here this time, right? I actually have, uh, I want to continue. I mean, I'm not want to put you on the spot and wanting to continue this conversation. So let me come to a closure on this conversation, and we'll have a conversation offline about this, right? I recapped most of it. I think the only thing I did not recap was the last item, which we discussed, that was diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI, essentially, right? That was the last item as a mental memory for me to remember that we were on page 24. And then I have as a teaser, if I'm able to convince Megli to hop back on a podcast, the teaser is the next item I had on page 30 was product led versus customer led. That is the next item I had, and I had a few questions about that that particular topic, essentially, right? So this is from I just want to have a closure here for this podcast before we continue. But I want to tell people, sometimes people listen to the first part, the middle, or they go to the end and then come back and see what's going on. So just one more quick recap, not about the page numbers, but we are having a conversation with Magali, who's based out of London. She was gracious enough to share, graceful enough to share her book with me. The book is titled "Future Proofing Product Management: A Guide to Current Trends and Beyond." Um, Definitely, I highly recommend you check it out. It doesn't matter which field, whether you're a product manager, whether you're even if you're not a product manager, if you're in any aspect of software development, I would highly recommend it. I'm pretty sure it's applicable to folks outside the industry as well. But just because my audience is typically folks in this space, I'm saying definitely go check out the book and see which points are of particular interest to you, for instance, right? And Megli, maybe if you share some links with me, I can add them in the podcast and other, distribute this on other platforms as well, right? So whether it's a link to book or a place to reach out, because I know you had sent me a link and I was able to get access to the link, for instance, right? Anything else you want to say before I hit stop record here?
No, there's so much more in the book. We've just touched on chapter 1, right? Chapter 2, yeah, is about processes, and chapter 3, I bundled together data and technology. But I think we've touched a lot on chapter 1 already, and if people want to learn more, they can definitely download the book. It's for free, so download it, share it around if you like it. Same as what you said with YouTube videos. If you like it, please share it. It's always nice. But yeah, thank you. I had a great time. It was a great conversation. I really liked your perspective and being challenged as well, in real time as well, having to think, oh, okay, how would I approach this? So it's great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I'm going to stop. I'm going to talk to you just after I hit stop record. But one more time, thank you very, very much, Magali Pelissier, for taking the time out of a busy afternoon or later evening in England to having this conversation. Super appreciated. And folks, I'll include the links that Magali is going to share with me. Please check those out and also check out Snowpal's links. I have to do my part in doing the shameless promotion at the very end. So definitely do check out our products. We have a web app which is on snowpal.com. Our mobile app is we have it on the Play Store and App Store. You can go to ios.snowpal.com to download the mobile app, android.snowpal.com to download the Android app. And this is from a B2C standpoint. And Megali's book has references to B2B versus B2C, which is another item I want to touch upon because we ventured into the B2B space earlier this year. We went live towards the middle of this year. Our APIs are on AWS Marketplace and on Blobber and other API hubs. So if you're building any solution, you don't want to do back-end work, all the boilerplate stuff. The idea is you leverage us and go to market sooner. So I'm going to tie my experience running the company, working with clients of different sizes, to the books, to Megali's experience as somebody who's French but who lives in London right now, and we'll go dig deeper into it. So super thanks one more time, and I'm just going to find the stop button here and hit stop. Thank you.